being recorded, just so you know. All right, everyone, welcome to our monthly site webinar. We are just really thrilled that you're here. This is our second webinar of the year. We normally have webinars on the second Friday of every month, so make sure that you're following us and checking us out on LinkedIn, where we'll publish our webinar topic and our speaker and all the information. We do this as a free monthly webinar as part of our way to connect with the public. We have, if you're not a member of SITE, let me tell you how great we are. We are the Society of Insurance Trainers and Educators. We are the only organization out there that is really focused on making sure that people who are teaching insurance, whether that's underwriting or claims or producers, whatever it is, that they have the training that they need. So we work with a specific group of people in the insurance industry, and it's really great. Being a member of SITE gives you so many benefits. Membership includes networking. You meet great people and you become friends. And we have the ITP designation. We have a newsletter. We put on a great program called Train the Trainer, which we are just getting ready to do our spring session in April. So if you're interested in that, please check out our website. It's not too late to register for it. And if you want some merchandise, we have a swag store, so you can check us out. We're also on YouTube, so you can like and subscribe and see previous webinars. We will have an annual conference this year, November, in Austin, and it's going to be weird because, you know, Austin's weird like that. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're planning it now, and just some of the stuff that I see behind the scenes, it's going to be bigger and better than it was last year. If you're a member of SITE and you want to get more involved, please check out. We're looking for board members. We're looking for committee members. If you want to, help with the newsletter or help with the website, help with the conference, please check us out. We're always looking for people who want to volunteer. And if you want a specific webinar topic, or maybe you think you might want to present a webinar, let us know that too, because we're always looking for people to help us with our monthly webinars. All right, today we have Anatomy of a Successful Training Session with John. John's been in the insurance profession for more than 40 years. He's been in underwriting and in management. He's done both sides of the fence, being with the carrier and being an agency producer. He's also been a wholesale broker. He has a lot of experience all throughout the industry. He has the CPCU designation, as well as the Associate in Marine Insurance Management designation, which is pretty cool, I think. We're really excited that he's here, and I am going to turn it over to you, John. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks everyone for being here. I'm very excited to be joining everyone today, and thank you for that introduction. I think what I have a lot of is gray hair, and part of that is a function of having done this for a while and knowing what it is that's in play. Speaking of that, let me do something a little different here before we get started. I need to swing this over to the other screen. That way I'll be able to see it and look at the camera and not look like I'm not looking at the camera. That's never a good thing. Okay, let's see if that does what we want to do here. Okay, everybody seeing? You're not seeing. Okay. That was a mistake then. I shouldn't have done it that way. And see, Ruth and I got together before we started so we could work all this out, and I didn't do my job. So there's that. All right, let's see if okay. Everybody seeing the opening screen there? Okay, good.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir. You are good to go.
Thank you. Well, good morning, good afternoon. Before I go into any of the other pieces of the puzzle and welcomes, let me set the stage for what we're going to be doing today. A study that Swiss Re did a while back tells us that agencies with inadequate training experience E&O claims at a frequency of 1 per every 5 to 7 staff members, as compared to 1 to every 15 to 20 staff members for highly trained groups. Now, think about that for a minute. That's literally a threefold increase. And those are claims that are traced directly to inadequate training. Not a bad policy, not bad luck, but inadequate training. Today, we're going to fix that. And so, over the course of the next several minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly what separates a training session that changes behavior from one that wastes everybody's time. My name is John Brunette. I'm from River Tree Consulting, and I've spent the last 40 plus years in this P&C insurance space. And my job today is to give you a framework that you can use the next time you design a training session, the next time you deliver any training, whether that's a 20-minute onboarding module for a new employee or it's a 3-day licensing course. Take a look at this data here. Over 50% of E&O claims involve inadequate training or poor knowledge transfer. That's why this session exists. Here's what we're going to be covering today. 5 topics, 5 sections. We're going to be done in 45 minutes, but more importantly, we're going to be looking at things that you can do Monday morning, things that'll make a difference. So let's go. Most training problems are really not delivery problems. They're design problems. And the reality is most design problems are actually planning problems. So before you open up PowerPoint to build your slide deck, or you go to AHA Slides or whatever your favorite tool of the month is, these questions, these pieces of the puzzle have to be dealt with. First off, you got to know what your gap is. I call it needs analysis. And so the need or the gap, you need to be able to define it. You need to be able to define it in terms of something that's one sentence. If it takes more than one sentence, you're not ready to design the training. Secondly, you need learning objectives. We've all heard that acronym SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. You need to write SMART objectives that are tied to job performance. So the example you see there on the slide, the learner will classify ISO GL codes at 95% accuracy within 30 days. It's specific, it's measurable, it has a time criteria in it, it's relevant. And then third, take a look at who your audience is, who's in the room, what's their experience level, are they licensed or not? Are they adjusters who've been doing this for a long, long time, or newbies? On the right side of the slide, you see a pre-training checklist. Let me just say very strongly, these are not optional. I've seen training fall flat on its face because of any and all of these items. So take a picture of this slide. I'll leave it up for just about 10 more seconds. These are the things you got to have hardwired before you even sit down to try to design the process. Now, before we go from here, if you've ever sat in a training that had nothing to do with your actual job, I want you to drop in the chat, that's me. That's me. Because you've got that frustration, and you know what that frustration is that other people are going to be feeling. Okay, questions on the blueprint phase before we keep going here? Here's something that every learning and development professional in our insurance space needs to know. Adults do not learn like children. And there's a learning methodology for children. It's called pedagogy, which means repetition. Say it again, say it 3 more times, say it in 3 languages, see if they get it, keep repeating it. Adults don't learn that way. Because when we're in school, we're told, here's the knowledge, absorb it, you'll need it. Adults reject that. We have to know why it matters. And so a guy named Malcolm Knowles came up with this theory called andragogy. And it changes how we design training. Quick review of Knowles' andragogy going back to 1968. 4 key points to it. First off is adults are autonomous. They want to be involved in what's going on. So let them pick the variable that you're going to work on. Pick a claim type you handle most. Second, you want to be able to connect to something they already know. We call it connecting to existing knowledge. So ask the question in the room that everybody can answer. How many of you have seen a coverage dispute that relates to water damage? Now they're involved. Now they're engaged because they've got something they can bolt that onto. Third, readiness to learn. Readiness to learn. You want to tie this to a milestone, pre-licensing, promotion, a new line of business being launched. And then fourth, something that's problem-centered. You want context first and then theory. So the scenario, a homeowner has a mold damage claim. Walk me through how you analyze the coverage. Walk me through what's happening here. There's a model that we use for training. It's called the 70-20-10 training model. And here's the reality. You're going to find that 70% of learning happens on the job. So that's sitting at the elbow of a senior underwriter or a senior claims adjuster, seeing what they do, what they don't do, how they approach things, how they handle things. 20% of learning happens through coaching and collaboration. One of the most dynamic things that I was ever exposed to, something called peer underwriting review, where literally underwriters brought their deals to the table and everybody on the team vetted their deal. This is a good deal. This is a bad deal. These are the right terms. These are the wrong terms. That's not the right broker. This is the right broker, whatever the scenario. And everybody learned from everybody else. Young underwriter, more experienced underwriter, they were able to pick up something from everybody else. And interestingly, only 10% of the learning process is formal training. That's the room we're in right now, your e-learning modules. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most learning and development teams invest 80% of their resources designing the 10%. The 10% only works if it accelerates the 70%. And so, by definition, every formal training session you design should be explicitly aimed at making the on the job experience faster, safer, more effective. So, let's do a quick group check in here. On a scale of 1 to 5, put into the chat how much of your current formal training connects to what your teams do in the field. 20 seconds. So Ruth, can you tag out some of the information on the chat and just share it with the group there? Because I can't see the chat.
Sure. So it looks like the average number is 3. I see a couple of 4s, but the average number that I'm seeing is 3.
Okay, so that means that a lot of people, maybe only about half or a little more than half of the training that you do connects to the teams in the field and what they're actually doing. There's where part of the challenge is, folks. There's where part of the reason for this session is all about. Now let's see. Okay. We're seeing, everybody's seeing delivering with confidence, right? I just clicked on the wrong spot there. Okay. So once you've designed, right? Once you've designed the training, you want to be able to put it out there, facilitate, and facilitate with something that's gonna stick. And here's what that session's going to look like. This is the 45-minute model. You start with a hook. This makes everybody in the room kind of lean forward a little bit and say, well, what did he say? Okay, I can relate. So you're going to talk about a big claim. You're going to talk about, oh, I don't know, you're going to talk about war risk in the Strait of Hormuz. Maybe you've heard. Lloyd's of London, and I don't think it's just Lloyd's, but the war risk market is constricting to where it's not much wider than the Strait of Hormuz. Why? Because there are challenges there. And everybody's going to lean forward and say, okay, I'm paying attention. And then you want to get to that stage where, again, you're going to ask a question that the group can answer. How many of you have seen that situation? And so you want to connect something new to something they already know about. And then again, core content and application, 20 minutes max on this. Every time you get to that 7-minute block, you're going to teach, demonstrate, and practice. Because here's the thing. If your slides are going longer than 7 minutes and you don't have an activity, you're giving a lecture. You're not training. Let that explode on you for a second. 7 minutes. Teach, demonstrate, practice. That's where it's got to be, because, again, this is how adults learn. Short attention span theater. Just going to put it out there for what it is. Then practice and feedback. You can do this in a room. You can do it virtual with breakout rooms. Give them a coverage dispute. Give them a policy form. But then come back together, debrief as a group, because, you know, if one person has a question, the chances are pretty good 5 other people had the same question and didn't ask it. Reminds me of a mentor I had one time. He said, you know, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. Because if you didn't ask it, that means the group didn't get a chance to hear the answer to it, because some of them probably had the same question. Because by doing that, you make errors safe to discuss, to be part of the process. And then get to that point of close and transfer. One thing you're going to do different tomorrow. Anchor learning to work action. That's what transfers training from the room to the desk. These are some of the engagement techniques that are going to work for you. The first one is what I call case-based discussion. Again, remember how adults learn, things that they can relate to. So you want to use real claim files or real policy disputes, obviously anonymize them, because adjusters and underwriters are going to trust content when it looks like what they do every day. Second, think about using what I call spaced repetition. 3 days after the training, send all of them an email and say, hey, this is what we trained on. Here's a what if. Give me your feedback. And then do the same thing after 10 days. It costs you 15 minutes to set it up and it'll work. Something that's huge right now, gamification. I can barely say it, much less spell it. But at the end of the day, it's competition. Who's winning? Welcome to March Madness. Who's in a basketball pool? Who gets that leaderboard every day to know, oh wait, my team lost? The stakes are real in that setting. And when you then tie it to performance metrics, it becomes even more real. And then the idea of immediate application, a transfer task. The example you see on the slide is look at one policy, look at one claim, and use this new framework we gave you before the next day is over. It gets to that point where that makes it feel real. That makes it feel like it's something that ties back to what they do. If you stop there, you didn't finish. You didn't really get the benefit out of it. It's like a golf swing. If you stop at the ball, does the ball go very far? No. If you're like me, does the ball go very straight? No. And so you have to follow through, and following through is measuring what matters. You've heard the phrase, what gets measured is what gets done. If you're going to measure it, people are going to pay a lot more attention to it. You want to go from training to learning to results. A guy named Daniel Kirkpatrick came up with this model back in 1959, just about the time the earth was cooling. This is a model for measuring training effectiveness. And the sad part is that most teams only use the first level, which is reaction. This is the survey that goes out and said, did you like it? Was it relevant? How would this help you handle? Rate us 1 to 5. You got to go to the next stage. You got to go to level 2, to learning. Did knowledge and skills actually improve? Sometimes if you're going to do a pre-assessment, then do a post-assessment at the same time and say, in the pre-assessment, we ask you what color should the policy be printed on, what color paper. In the post-assessment, you're going to ask, did printing it on blue paper make a difference? And what are you going to do about it? Did you learn more because it was on blue paper? And you need to target some kind of a metric there. You see that start to get into just the second level, because we get to the fourth level, just to move ahead, you see we're going to tie to key performance indicators. Then you go to the third level. The behaviors that are there. Are people doing it differently? Look at it at 30 and 60 and 90 days. Are they using the framework? And recognize this is where a lot of programs fall apart. Interestingly enough, because this level requires that managers get involved. And so managers have to be committed to training. We'll talk about that more in a couple of minutes. The challenge is some of these managers haven't been briefed on how important that is. They haven't learned. And so here's another training opportunity. And then last is results. Did what you trained on move the needle? Well, the only way that is going to be measurable is if you set that learning objective and you've tied it to a KPI ahead of time to be able to say, okay, we trained on making sure we've got the right ISO general liability codes. And the metric was 95% of the time it's the right code. Our go in was we're doing it at 80. After 30, 60, 90 days, are we at 95%? Being able to measure it is critical because here's the challenge. If you can't connect your training to at least one business key performance indicator, training is going to be the first thing cut in the budget. And that's hard to hear, but that's reality because if leadership doesn't see value in training, if you as a trainer can't demonstrate value in training, then it becomes an expense line item, not a critical success factor, not contributing to a KPI. And so if you walk away with just one thing from this session, let it be this: measure at that results level. Even if it's only one metric, that's the difference between learning and development being seen as a cost center and being seen as a strategic asset. Okay, last section. This is where we get practical about the resistance that you're going to face when you go back to your organization and you try to apply the things we've talked about today. You're going to hear FAQs and objections. I want to give you some of the words to respond. How long should a training session be? Research says 20 to 45 minutes if you're focusing on building a skill. If you've got big topics like an endorsement or a policy form that you want to review, chunk it into sessions. All training in person or virtual. You need to blend both. A lot of organizations today have to blend both because they are far flung, and getting everybody to one point doesn't happen every day of every month. What's the best way to handle experienced adjusters who already know this? Use a pre-assessment. And those that score well on the pre-assessment, guess what? Maybe they ought to co-facilitate. Because you know what happens there? That gives credibility to them with their peers, but it also reinforces the knowledge that they've got. How often should compliance topics be retrained? That becomes a function of how often they change. Monthly, quarterly? Is there a new form that's out that, or a new audit finding? Those will trigger training, and you want to build those triggers into your workflow. What if we don't have a dedicated instructional designer? That happens probably more frequently than most people recognize. Start with somebody who's a subject matter expert. So if you're doing a claim training, you're going to go to your head of claims, your chief claim officer, their designee, a senior adjuster, and you're going to start with a template. Maybe some of these things that we've talked about here today. I've given you a couple of methods to look at there. One's called ADDIE, which is an acronym for Analyze, Design, Develop, Implementation, and Evaluation. It's a very linear process. And then SAM, which is Successive Approximation. Start with one iteration, fix what you need to, go to a next iteration. Use those as kind of scaffolding to build your training on. If your organization uses a learning management system, some of those also have instructional design support. And then one of the issues that, maybe artificial intelligence helps and hurts in is call centers. Difficult customer calls. How do we train for those soft skills? Look at some real scripts. Obviously, again, either anonymize them or get consent and do role plays. Help people understand what it sounds like when they say those words. Because think about it, sometimes scripts sound scripted and people are not real comfortable with that. And so the more comfortable they get, then the better they're going to be with it from that standpoint. And then do a debrief. In the military, they tell me that one of the most powerful things that happens is what they call an after action report, which is a debrief. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? How can we do it better next time? To be able to say, we trained on so and so, but we didn't hit the mark because we couldn't see it moving the needle. There's your debrief. And guess what? You just created the gap for the next training design. Here's some objections and maybe how you can handle them. We don't have time for training. We have too many claims to process. I've heard that more times than I can count. Here's the response. That's exactly why we train. Undertrained adjusters take 30% longer to handle a claim and have twice the E&O exposure. And spend this 45 minutes now, and we don't have the rework and the liability later. Our team has years of experience. They don't need this. Experience is a foundation. It's not a ceiling. Let me say that again. Experience is a foundation. It's not a ceiling. Because you know what? The only thing constant is change. Just ask anybody who's ever looked at an ISO form and then 2 years later tried to find that same ISO form. Oh, wait, it's been revised 3 times. That's how top performers stay ahead. And remember, don't be defensive about it because experience is an asset. It's not an excuse. Can we just send them a memo or a policy update? Reading has a 10% retention rate. When you have structured training, you have application exercises, you're getting up in the 60 to 70% range. If you reframe the memo as the riskiest choice, that's going to land in the boardroom. That's going to get attention with your chief risk officer who's got to decide, how does my E&O cover respond in this setting? Our last training session didn't change anything. Why bother? Well, you know what? That's a design problem. That's not a training problem. If you don't have job relevant scenarios, if your managers are not following up, then nothing's going to stick. That's what this framework addresses. Training is HR's job, not mine as a manager. Managers have to be involved in reinforcing the training. That's part of what their role is. It's a partnership, not a handoff. HR managers have to work together. Otherwise, you've got competing priorities there. We'll just hire experienced people who don't need training. Good luck with that. Maybe you've heard the statistic from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that says the insurance industry will lose 400,000 people by the end of this calendar year. That's directly attributable to the graying of America. And so when those people walk out the door, you know what else walks out the door? Their knowledge. And so if you're going to replace them, you're going to have a hard time finding a similar level of experience. You got to train. You got to provide that training. And even if it's just onboarding, it takes a while. And even if you do find senior talent, I changed jobs more than once in my career, and it took me 6 months to figure out where to park, where the men's room was, and where the water fountain was. And that was with being in the office every day. Go hybrid and you're only in the office 2 or 3 days. It takes that much longer. This is a risky strategy because experienced people are in short supply. So let's take a knowledge check here. What are some of the other objections you're facing? Drop
Hey,
one in the
John.
chat. You got some time there.
We have a question, John, while people are writing some objectives.
Sure.
Heather asks if all of these trainers are only spending 50% of their time actually teaching on the subject matter that people need to do the job and affect KPIs, how do they shift the mindsets of leaders and individuals who are in charge of what might be taught? How do we best advocate for training that matters?
I think that's a huge question, and it's one of those things that hits the financial statement. If you can tie training gaps and by extension training to key performance indicators, you can tie them to the performance of the business, which means you can tie them now to return on investment. And so training doesn't become an expense line item. It becomes a contributing factor to success. And if the boardroom is not signed on with that, then you have to stay focused on how do I get training in front of senior leaders to know that it's that important. Did that answer the question, Heather?
Yeah, I did, John. I just know that this is a challenge that all trainers face, especially in a lot of the larger organizations, because what is often the conception of a training department is I think there's an understanding that training's needed, but I don't think they understand how critical and crucial it is to the bottom line of the organization that people are trained well to do their job. And I often think that training becomes that sacrificial lamb on the altar of the financial objectives of an organization, because trainers are caught up a lot of the time pushing training out that feels meaningless to any type of like performance of the people that they're training. And that's because they load on training that's associated with what they consider to be more HR focused type of, compliance. Compliance is important. I get that. But like the average employee compliance training is not really conducive to the job role that people have to do, unless it's like, okay, your compliance training for your claims job. And so I think trainers often are caught in the middle of this push and pull and trying to advocate, and often don't have the data. Like, you don't have your fingertips on the data that says, oh, by the way, in this organization, this is the results that we get when we train this way, because you don't even get the option to train that way most of the time. So I don't know. I think like helping trainers to tell that story is a big thing that we here at Site could potentially do. And giving them like concrete ways to look for that kind of data. Because you're only going to convince senior leadership in an organization when you have the data in your hand that says these are the actual results, by the way.
Yeah. I think the other piece of that puzzle becomes understanding the pain points of an organization, because again, that gets back to that gap, right? You design the training to fit that gap. That gap is a pain point. That gap is it's claim leakage. It takes us 90 days to get a policy out. It's poor audit results. Being able to deal with that gap, then being able to go to senior leadership and say, is this a pain point? Do we care if it takes 90 days to get a policy out? If our customers say it doesn't, then we'll train on something different. Let's talk about where the need is. And so I think that, again, it starts back to analyzing the gap and then design the training to fill the gap. And And at that point, you've almost got senior leadership's buy-in if they agree that that's the gap and that the gap is impacting performance to the extent that it's impacting return on investment. Because again, we get back to, if you can position learning and development as an asset and not an expense item, then you will not be the first budget cut. You'll survive that, and maybe all of them, hopefully all of them. Great question, Heather, because again, it's something that small, medium, and large organizations all face. And I've, good or bad, I've been part of all three different stratas of those, and I've seen it. So Ruth, in the chat, what kind of other objections did we have?
We don't have any. Nobody commented. But
don't tell me I covered them all.
No, there's some out there.
Okay. All right. Well, let's press on then. Okay. Before we close, I want to give you 60 seconds to write something down. So on a piece of paper or in your notes app, write one thing you're going to do differently, design differently, or measure differently starting Monday. Not a list, one thing.
While they're thinking about that, John Gray did ask a question in chat, and he's wondering how many people are trying micro learning as a tool.
Heather says yes, she is. Others that are trying that.
I know CIC just introduced a whole little micro learning thing, and I think Kristen had her hand up. Maybe she took her hand down. Maybe it was an accident.
Oh yeah, I was just raising my hand and just took it down. But no, yeah, we're trying to find some little different ways to squeeze things in during the time that our underwriters have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the one thing that you wrote down, if you're willing, drop it in the chat. What is it you're going to do differently come Monday? What is it you're going to design differently? What is it you're going to measure differently? What kinds of things are coming in there, Ruth?
I see more claim scenarios. Identify, Corrine said, identify the measure we are trying to impact and the status of training aligns with that measure. That sounds brilliant. Maria chimed in on the micro learning. They're talking about that, and I think Scott was talking about that too, for maybe more claim scenarios.
So those things that you just put in the chat, that's your level 3 outcome. Okay. So here are some key takeaways. 5 key takeaways. Read them. Take a picture of the screen if you want to. These are the things that you need to share with your team. First off, design backwards. Start with the performance outcome you need. What was that Covey said? Begin with the end in mind, right? Build the training to close the gap. Second, adults need relevance. Everything you do in training has to mirror real work. Don't use abstract theory without application. Third, the 10%. Remember the 70-20-10? The 10% is not enough. Manager coaching and on the job practice seal the deal. Fourth, measure at all 4 levels. The survey doesn't do the job and it doesn't establish value by itself. You got to tie the training to some measure of performance, something that's going to get on somebody's radar, right? so that you can say this training made a difference. This training was that important. And then be ready for objections. Be ready for the things that are going to happen. Have some data when you walk into the room so you know what's going to happen. So recognize that your next training session has the power to reduce risk, build trust, and elevate your team. So design it like you mean it. What other questions do we have?
Anybody have any questions for John? You can put them in the chat or come off mute. You must have did a really great job because I don't see any questions, John.
I do actually have a question. Sorry.
No, you're good.
As trainers developing, like if we don't have an instructional design background, which I would say is probably a good chunk of us, are there resources that you would recommend that are accessible to learn as you are doing your job to help improve this process?
Yeah, that's a great issue, and that's one of the things that was in the objections. If you don't have an instructional designer, once you identify the gap that you want to train on, find your subject matter expert on that gap. So if it's a claim, call Heather. She knows everything about claims. She knows things about claims that haven't even been invented yet. Okay. So you have a Heather in your organization, I'm sure. So find that subject matter expert and have that discussion, because you want them to sign off on the training anyway once it's done, right? So get them involved in that development, and then use one of those frameworks, ADDIE or SAM. See if there are some tools that your organization may have that haven't been utilized for training. Maybe they've been utilized for other things, and I'm thinking of communication tools. I'm not a huge fan of some of the communication methods, but different strokes for different folks. Everybody's got a new approach from that standpoint. So I hope that helps in terms of perspective there. Yeah, Heather says some good courses on Coursera and Udemy. I've used Coursera before for some course information. How do you handle when senior leadership asks for a specific type of training asset and that's not the best way to deliver that material? How do you get them to be open to a different way? I think if it were me, I would flip the script and say, let's talk about what you intend to accomplish with this. If we go that direction, tell me how that the way you want to do it translates to accomplishing that goal. And if their perspective is that convincing, then maybe you're the one that's got to change your thought process as to whether it's the best approach, or maybe you get the opportunity to convince them, that's not going to get us where you want to go. Because again, you let senior leadership set the set the boundaries for what's going to be considered success. They get to define it. Then you're going to design to it, and asking them to say, how does that work? It's there. Other questions? I finally figured out how to get the chat over here. It's been so long since I used chat from that standpoint. So thank you everyone for being part of what we're doing today. If you have questions later, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to interact on whatever level I can to help. I don't work in corporate America anymore, so it's not like you'd be revealing secrets to a competitor, because I'm not your competitor. I'm here to help, and what Site's doing with everything from train the trainer to these webinars. great resources. Hope everybody can continue to plug in and find some value. So with that, I'll hand back over to you, Ruth.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, John. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the great comments and chat and the participation. And please, I posted a bunch of links at the beginning of the session. Our site page, our YouTube page, our LinkedIn page. Make sure you follow us. We just enjoy putting these webinars together and the chance to network and grow together as a group. So we're glad y'all are here. You have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Greg's chiming in, hope to see y'all in Austin. Make sure to be on the lookout for more information about our conference as we get closer and closer. Heather just put the dates in there, November 18th and 19th. So save the date. Hopefully y'all can attend because it is going to be weird and wonderful and amazing, all of the things. But y'all have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see y'all next month. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.